The engine of the BT-13 trainer whined as it clawed upward through the morning heat, a sound too thin for war, and too gentle for the sky it now fought in. Lieutenant Evelyn Mercer sat snug in the cockpit, her boots barely reaching the pedals, her gloved hands steady on the stick. The airplane vibrated like a living creature with doubts of its own, yet it responded to her touch with something close to affection, as though the machine recognized her, the way old horses recognize a rider who listens instead of pulls. She banked left, sun cutting across her cheek, and dipped the wing just enough to skim the top of a rising thermal. Paper targets fluttered below on the practice range, the circles neat and patient. Her shots had already punched through the dead center. She didn't need to look to know. She could feel the recoil, the angle, the sound, but the men on the ground wouldn't care. They rarely did. From below, drifting faintly up through the roar of her engine, she could hear it laughter. The sound carried across the runway like metal scraping against pride. "Tiny Mercer," someone shouted. "Flying that toy again?" Another voice added, "Give her a step stool so she can see over the dash." Evelyn didn't flinch. She'd heard worse since the day she arrived on this salt-blasted island base in the Pacific. 5 feet tall in thick boots, narrow shoulders, soft-spoken, she looked more like a young mechanic's little sister than a pilot trusted with altitudes and guns. The nickname Tiny had stuck before she even climbed into her first aircraft here. They meant it as a joke, or an insult, or both. But the sky had never mocked her. Only the men did. She rolled the trainer out of the last turn and leveled toward the base. The hangars shimmered in the heat like mirages, metal ribs glowing under the merciless sun. A line of mechanics moved across the ramp, shirts off, faces streaked with oil. They watched her approach, some shading their eyes, some smirking. She landed with a soft kiss of rubber on earth. The kind of landing that made instructors nod if instructors ever bothered nodding at her. She taxied toward her slot, engine coughing gently as it cooled. Sergeant Wheeler jogged toward her plane, wiping sweat from his brow with a rag that had once been white. Wheeler was one of the few who never mocked her. Quiet, sharp-eyed, a medic who had chosen the airfield over the main hospital for reasons he never explained. He raised a hand in greeting. "You scraped the sky clean again," he said as she climbed out. "Targets are crying down there. Maybe they'll stop laughing if they see the score sheet," she replied. Wheeler snorted. "You know they won't." She knew. 2 pilots walked past Randall and Preston, both tall, sweat-slicked, smug. Randall made a show of bending down slightly, squinting at her, as though searching for something small on the ground. "Careful, Wheeler," Randall drawled. "Tiny might blow away in a crosswind. Better tie her down." Preston laughed, a shallow, metallic sound. "Maybe give her a real plane one day. Something with teeth." Evelyn watched them go without expression. Her silence always irritated them. They wanted fluster, embarrassment, excuses. She offered none. Silence was the one battlefield she always won. Colonel Hayes emerged from the operations shack a moment later. Cap low, clipboard under one arm. A man carved out of regulations and sunburn, he always looked half annoyed, half exhausted. He scanned the runway, his gaze landing on her trainer and the scorched paper targets being collected from the range. "Mercer?" he called. "Decent flying?" It was the closest thing to praise she had ever received from him. She saluted. "Thank you, sir." Hayes hesitated, not out of sentiment, but calculation. Evelyn could see the gears trying to decide whether acknowledging her skill publicly would start. Another round of grumbling among the male pilots. He settled on a nod and walked off. Wheeler watched him go. "One day," he muttered, "they're all going to realize you fly that little trainer better than half of them fly their fighters." Evelyn wiped oil from her wrist. The trainer's warm metal at her back. "That day won't come," she said softly. "Not unless the sky forces them to see it." Wheeler tilted his head. "And what if the sky does?" Evelyn looked upward, the vault of blue enormous, eternal, waiting. "If it does," she said, "I'll be ready." And somewhere, deep under the hum of the airfield generators, destiny stirred. The heat thickened by noon, turning the runway into a wavering ribbon of silver. Pilots lounged under the shade of a canvas awning, their laughter drifting across the tarmac like drifting smoke, thin, irritating, persistent. Evelyn ignored it as she signed the maintenance log for her trainer, though a stiff ache was beginning to settle into her shoulders from the morning's maneuvers. She had just returned the clipboard when the base loudspeaker exploded with urgency. All pilots report to flight operations. Scramble condition 2. Repeat scramble condition 2. Every man shot upright. Wheeler froze mid-step, eyes narrowing. That's no drill. Across the bay, Colonel Hayes stormed out of the ops shack, waving a sheet of paper with the ferocity of a man who had just been handed a problem he did not have the personnel to solve elegantly. "Everyone inside?" he barked. "Move." Evelyn found herself pulled into the current of pilots rushing toward the briefing room. The air inside was stifling, thick with sweat and aviation fuel. The machines humming outside seemed to vibrate the walls with an impatience that matched the tension in the room. Hayes slammed the briefing map onto the table. Flight call sign Aero 6 jumped 20 miles offshore, he announced. "One pilot down in the water. The second is limping home with half an engine. We've got enemy fighters too, possibly 3 Zeros circling the area." Murmurs erupted immediately. Randall scoffed loudly, arms crossed. Sir, we don't have enough airworthy fighters on deck. Half the P-40s are down for maintenance. Hayes glared at him. I'm aware of our shortages, Lieutenant. Then came the words Evelyn knew were coming the moment the alarm sounded. We're scrambling the trainers. A near-silent beat followed. Shock, disbelief, resentment blending into one potent atmosphere. Preston lifted his hands, as though trying to physically push the idea away. Sir, those are practice birds. They can't dogfight. They can fly, Hayes snapped. And right now, that's what matters. Aero 6's pilot won't last long if those Zeros find him in the water. Eyes shifted around the room until they inevitably landed on Evelyn. Randall smirked. Let Tiny take the lead. Maybe the Japanese will die laughing. Soft chuckles rippled. Wheeler, who'd slipped into the back of the room, shot Randall a look sharp enough to cut canvas. Hayes didn't indulge the laughter. Mercer, he said, pointing at her, you're flying. The room deflated into stunned quiet. Sir, Randall protested, disbelief dripping from each syllable. She flies a trainer better than most, Hayes said, and she's logged more hours in the air this month than any of you. Evelyn swallowed. I'll take the mission, sir. The colonel met her eyes for one brief, private moment. Beneath the hardened lines, she saw something almost like trust, or desperation masquerading as trust. She could work with either one. Good. Form up on runway 2. You launch in 5 minutes. The room erupted into motion. The BT-13 trainer sat trembling on the tarmac by the time Evelyn reached it. Engine already warming under the hands of a frantic mechanic. The propeller spun with impatient rhythm, chopping the air like it was eager to prove itself. Wheeler jogged to her side, out of breath. Here, he said, handing her a strip of leather, a padded extender for the shoulder harness. They won't check this in the rush. She fitted it without hesitation. Thank you. He grabbed her wrist before she climbed the wing. Evelyn, don't try to be a hero. Just bring the downed pilot home. She smiled faintly, the small, tight smile she used when fear and determination lived in the same breath. If I can. Randall strode past, climbing into his own trainer with a snort. Try to keep up, Tiny. Evelyn ignored him as she slid into the cockpit. The seat embraced her like an old friend. Patched, worn, familiar. She pulled the canopy halfway closed. Feeling the humid air cling to her skin, she ran through her checklist. Each click of a switch, a grounding ritual. Fuel enough. Ammunition, barely. Engine trusting her more than the men did. Airframe, tired, but loyal. Her heart thudded unusually hard. Through the glass she saw Colonel Hayes raise a fist. Trainers launch. Evelyn pushed the throttle forward. The engine screamed high. Desperate, eager, and the trainer shot down the runway with a trembling determination that felt almost human. The wheels lifted, the earth dropped away, and suddenly the mocking voices grew faint, replaced by wind, horizon, and the clean clarity of the sky dot above the clouds. Nothing mattered except what she could do with her hands. Her instincts, her courage. 20 miles offshore, a wounded pilot was waiting, and somewhere near him, unseen but inevitable, the Zeros were circling like sharks drawn to blood. Evelyn angled her trainer toward the open ocean. Aero 6, she whispered to the sky. Hold on. She didn't know yet that the sky was about to test her in ways that would silence every man who had ever called her tiny, and history was about to take note. The ocean below glittered like shattered glass. Each wave crest a shard, catching the hard afternoon sun. Evelyn flew low at first, letting the trainer hug the warm currents rising from the sea. The engine hummed a nervous note, higher than a fighter's growl, quicker, almost anxious. It knew where it was going. It knew what was coming. She adjusted her grip on the stick, steadying her breath as the wind roared past the canopy. Randall's voice crackled through the radio behind her. Squadron 2, Titan formation. Tiny, don't fall behind. His voice ground against her nerves like sand under boot soles. She didn't answer. She climbed instead, letting the little trainer slip between two clouds like a needle threading cotton. Above her, the sky widened into a vast, brilliant blue. A stage, a battlefield, a reckoning. Wheeler's last words echoed in her mind. Don't try to be a hero. She wasn't. She was trying to be a pilot. There was a difference. A thin plume of smoke appeared on the horizon, the faltering trail of a wounded aircraft struggling to stay in the air. Aero 6. Are you reading? Randall called. A faint, broken reply crackled through the static. NGN hit. Losing altitude. 0 circling. Can't. Then nothing. Evelyn's heart clenched. She pushed the throttle forward. The trainer surged out. The downed pilot's aircraft finally came into view. A battered P-39, skimming dangerously close to the water, its engine coughing with each rotation of the prop. The plane wobbled like a drunk trying to keep dignity, but Evelyn's eyes weren't on the wounded bird. They were on the shadow circling above it, a Zero sleek, white, pristine, wings cutting the sky with elegant predation. The Japanese fighter traced a patient spiral, waiting for the final moment when the P-39 dropped too low to maneuver. Waiting for its kill. Evelyn tightened her jaw. Not today. Randall's voice cut through the radio. Tiny, stay in formation. We'll break on my signal. She did not stay in formation. She dove. The ocean rushed up to meet her, the trainer screaming with the sudden descent. Wind tore at the fabric wings, the whole aircraft trembling as though begging her to reconsider. The Zero noticed her too late. Evelyn pulled up just behind it, lining up her shot. Her trainer didn't have much firepower. 2.30 caliber machine guns, barely enough to scare a fighter away in normal circumstances, but she had something more lethal. She knew exactly where to aim. Teaching rookies had drilled into her the anatomy of aircraft, weak points, stress points, the soft underbelly of even the strongest machine. She squeezed the trigger. The guns rattled, spitting fire, bullets stitched across the Zero's tail, severing the elevator cable with surgical precision. The enemy fighter bucked violently, its nose pitching upward as control died in an instant. It spun once graceful as a falling leaf and plunged into the sea with a hiss of steam and a brief final bloom of white spray. First kill, her breath shuddered out of her. The radio erupted. Holy Tiny got one, Preston yelled. Randall stammered. Beginner's luck. Maintain formation. But Evelyn didn't hear them. She was already scanning the sky. Because Redditors rarely hunted alone, the second Zero appeared like a phantom bursting out of a cloud bank, a flash of sunlight on wing metal, a roar rushing past her canopy. Evelyn jerked the stick just in time, as trace rounds sliced through the air, where she'd been a heartbeat before. Her stomach lurched. This one wasn't circling lazy prey, this one was hunting her. The trainer could not outrun a Zero. Everyone knew that. The Japanese aircraft was faster, sleeker, armed with heavier guns. But Evelyn had something else. She knew the trainer's quirks as intimately as her own. Heartbeat. She threw the plane into a maneuver no sane pilot would attempt. A rolling scissors, but tighter, sharper, using the lightweight frame of the trainer to pivot around its own axis. The Zero overshot. Surprised. Evelyn yanked up, flipping onto his tail. The enemy pilot corrected beautifully, too beautifully. Whoever he was skilled, seasoned, ruthless. He juked left, then right, throwing off her aim. Evelyn's fingertips tingled on the trigger. She could almost feel his instincts. Matching hers, he dove out. She followed. He leveled out. She mirrored. The two aircraft spiraled in a tightening duel. Predator and prey trading roles with each rotation. Evelyn's breath came ragged now, sweat dripping into her eyes. The trainer groaned under the strain. She felt something deep inside her. Not fear, not anger, but a sharpening clarity. A narrowing of the world to a single point. A sliver of sky opened behind the Zero's right wing. A microsecond of vulnerability. Evelyn didn't think. She acted. She fired. The rounds stitched across the Zero's fuselage. Smoke erupted from the engine, thick and black. The canopy popped open a moment later. The pilot bailing out, his parachute blossoming like a white flower in the endless blue. Second kill. Mercer. Holy hell, Mercer. Someone shouted over the radio. Two. She's got two. Randall's voice trembled with disbelief. Tiny, hold position. For God's sake. But the sky wasn't done with her. A warning voice whispered in her instincts deeper than fear, older than logic. There's another. The third Zero dove out of the sun. Evelyn never saw it. She felt it. A shift in air pressure. A spike in engine tone. A shadow not where it should be. She rolled instinctively, not enough. Bullets tore through her left wing, ripping fabric from frame. The trainer shuddered violently. One wingtip trailing smoke. Her body slammed sideways in the cockpit. Pain burst through her ribs. Tiny, break. Randall screamed. She couldn't. The trainer had lost stability. The next hit would kill her. Unless she did the unthinkable, she cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, a vacuum where sound had been, a void swallowing everything. The trainer dropped, nose first. Like a stone, the Zero followed. Committed now, expecting an easy finish. Evelyn waited, counted, felt gravity, pulling her into the cold deep of the ocean. At the last possible heartbeat, she reignited the engine. The propeller sputtered, coughing, then roared back to life. The trainer jerked upward, catching a rising thermal so suddenly it flung her teeth together. She pulled back hard. The aircraft groaning in agony. The Zero shot past underneath, overshooting the kill. Now it was exposed. Evelyn rolled onto its tail, lungs burning, vision tunneling from G-force and pain. Her hands felt electric, every nerve sharpened by adrenaline and something more. A defiance that tasted like freedom. She fired. The bullets pierced the Zero's fuel line. A bright orange bloom erupted, not theatrical, not cinematic, just a cold, efficient flame consuming metal and air and possibility. The wreckage spiraled into the ocean, trailing black smoke that smeared the sky like ink. Third kill. Silence filled the radio, a stunned, reverent silence. Then you just shot down three, Preston whispered. Impossible, Randall murmured. That's art. That's impossible, Mercer. Hayes' voice entered, tight with emotion. He rarely allowed himself. Escort the wounded pilot home. Now and good work, Lieutenant. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her ribs screaming, her engine coughing, her trainer bleeding smoke from its wounded wing. She glanced toward the pilot in the water. Arrow 6 bobbing near his parachute, waving weakly. I see him, she said. Her voice was calm, steadier than she felt. She guided the crippled trainer toward the downed pilot, circling protectively above him as the rescue boat sped toward the location. Randall flew up alongside her. He looked at her through his canopy long, silent, disbelieving, not mocking, not amused. Trying to reconcile the sky's truth with the prejudice he had clung to, he saluted Dot for the first time since she'd arrived on the island. Evelyn Mercer saw respect in his eyes, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it where it counted. Not on the ground, but in the endless, impartial sky. Asterisk as the rescue boat hauled the wounded pilot aboard. Evelyn's trainer coughed one last time, a final metal sigh, before she gently turned toward home. The sun glimmered on the ocean below, reflecting 3 dark streaks of smoke where fighters had fallen. The wind pressed against her canopy like a sleeping animal settling down after a long hunt. Evelyn whispered to the sky, barely audible even to herself. Not bad for a tiny trainer, but she knew something with a certainty deeper than pride. When she landed, nothing would be the same. The runway smelled like spent oil and hot metal when Evelyn rolled the trainer into its slot. Mechanics clustered around it, hands busy but faces slack with something like worship. The little plane sat crooked, one wing slightly lower where shrapnel had chewed the fabric. Smoke curled from a seam. A man with a wrench dabbed at it, as if treating a wound. For a beat she simply sat, letting the world catch up. "You did it," Wheeler said quietly, appearing at her side like an old friend who'd been waiting to see whether legends were true. She let out a breath that might have been a laugh or a sob. "We did it," she corrected. The pronoun filled the space between her and the men who'd watched, the men who'd called her tiny like a taunt. It mattered not because she needed to share the credit, but because she needed to keep from turning the moment into a singular hunger. News moved faster than the skids of her plane could cool. By the time she clambered down, Colonel Hayes was at the edge of the ramp, his expression unreadable. Men followed him with cameras and clipboards, faces eager to render a narrative that could be shaped and sold. "Lieutenant Mercer," Hayes said, formal now, the soldier's courtesy cinched tight. "Report to operations. Major Stewart is waiting." Evelyn felt the old quiet anxiety coil in her gut. Major Stewart counterintelligence meant questions that did not seek truth so much as leverage. It meant files and conclusions already half-written. She walked into the operations shack and felt the temperature drop. The room smelled of stale coffee and bureaucracy. Major Stewart sat behind a desk like it was a gallows, and he, the warden. "Lieutenant," he said, flat and precise. "Explain," she told it plainly. "The downed pilot, the circling zero, the decision to break formation." She said none of it with bravado. She said it like a technician describing a fixed detail. Sequence, result. Stewart's pen tapped. "You used a trainer aircraft to intercept and destroy 3 enemy fighters," he said, more statement than question. "Yes. And you observed standard combat protocol while doing so?" he asked, trying the shape of the truth against her. "I observed what kept men alive in my plane," she said, which, in that moment, was all I could do. Stewart's mouth tightened. "The report to your superiors will note," he paused, choosing the word like a blade, "that a non-standard craft engaged and destroyed multiple enemy aircraft. This raises questions concerning training, procedures, authorization, and operational risk." Translation: somebody higher up would prefer neat categories, pilots, fighters, trainers, to remain unbroken. Her success muddied those categories, and that made men uncomfortable. After the interrogation, photographers wanted staged shots, Evelyn stepping out of the cockpit, helmet underarm, hero's jawline catching the sun. Reporters wanted lines. Tiny trainer shoots down 3 headlines that tasted like triumph and like hunger. The base wanted a narrative it could control, a tidy victory that wouldn't upset the established order. For some, she'd be a brief emblem. For others, a problem that had to be contained. That night, after the lights dimmed and the hubbub thinned into the steady rhythm of generators, she sat alone in the med tent. A cot creaked under her weight. The overhead lamp made a small, honest pool of light. Wheeler brought her a cup of tea and sat nearby, refusing to intrude but refusing to leave. "They'll pin you," he said finally. "A medal, a photo, then they'll file you away where no one bothers to look. Stateside instruction. History books with footnotes. A nice quiet place that makes everyone feel brave again." She drank the tea. It was bitter with too much sugar. She didn't care. "I don't want a medal if it means my story gets used to keep other people small," she said. The words arrived raw. "If I become the reason they can say, 'See, we tried and closed the file on women pilots,' I'd rather they remember it honestly." Wheeler considered her. "You risked the lot for a man you didn't know." "He was a pilot," she said simply. That was enough. They sat in silence, the tent breathing around them. Outside, far-off radios talked of policy, supply, and the logistical arithmetic that treats human beings like ledger entries. Memory came to her then, an old woman who'd fixed wings in a small shed back in Georgia, a teacher who had told a little girl to stop apologizing for occupying space. Tiny had once been a term of diminishment, but tonight, in the quiet dark, Evelyn felt it fold into something else. She pulled her hands into her lap. The scars along her knuckles ached where the harness had bitten into flesh. There was a hollow where adrenaline had been, and in that hollow a question sat. Was this what she wanted? To be seen by the world, only to have her sighting sterilized and catalogued until it served someone else's margin. She pictured the faces in the mess hall that afternoon. The mocking, the joke-like slurs. Would they change? Would Randall's salute become a routine now? A gesture performed because image demanded it. The next morning, Colonel Hayes called a meeting. The brass had decided to make an example, but they could not quite decide of what. Pride in victory warred with conservative caution. We'll recommend her for a commendation, Hayes said, reading from a prepared statement. But we must also be mindful of precedent and the message we send to Allied commands. In the silence that followed, Evelyn realized how small an arena this all was. The sky had been enormous, impartial. Here on the ground, the machinery made of paperwork and fear tried to carve meaning to suit itself. She stood. When you take my photo for the paper, she said, voice steady, write the truth. Say we flew with what we had, and we did what we had to. Don't make me a slogan. Hayes looked at her. Something like respect and helplessness, wrestling in his features. I'll see what I can do, he said. It was not much. It was everything he could permit. Evelyn left the room aware of a new weight. Not the weight of a medal, but the weight of possibility. She had proven, in the bluntest way, that the categories men had constructed were porous under pressure. What she could not know yet was whether that proof would become a bridge or a wall. She walked back to the trainer and rested, her palm on its warm fuselage. The nickname hung in the air around her like a thin banner, frayed at the edges. Somewhere, a man muttered tiny with a different tone now. Surprise, maybe respect. It would not undo years of smallness, but it had, for a moment, shifted the way the sky read her, and that, she thought, was the first honest victory. In the days that followed, the base settled into a strange rhythm, part routine, part rumor. Evelyn noticed the shift in the air long before she saw its shape in people's behavior. Men who once brushed past her without a glance now nodded stiffly, awkwardly, as though respect were a language they hadn't practiced in years. Others stayed silent, unsure whether to cling to their old assumptions or abandon them in favor of what the sky had revealed. Randall avoided her at first. Shame is a heavy thing to carry, and heavier still when the person you misjudged becomes the mirror you can no longer look away from. But 3 days after the dogfight, as she walked past the line of parked aircraft, he stepped out from behind a wing and blocked her path. I owe you something, he said. Evelyn blinked. You don't owe me anything. I do, he insisted. An apology, and the truth. You fly better than I do. The words looked painful in his mouth, but honest. She nodded once. It was enough. But medals, apologies, and revised opinions could not rewrite the deeper truth. One pilot's extraordinary day did not dismantle an institution built over decades. Higher command sent orders soon after. Evelyn was to be reassigned stateside as a flight instructor. A softer posting, a quieter one. A way to celebrate her without letting her disrupt the structure too much. Hayes delivered the message himself. It's not a punishment, he said. Though his voice betrayed the tension, his duty required him to hide. They think you'll inspire the next generation of pilots. Evelyn considered the wording. Inspire, not lead. But she also thought of the trainees she could shape. The young women who might enter the hangar one day and see something other than the limits prescribed for them. I'll take it, she said. Hayes exhaled, relief mixed with regret. For what it's worth, he added quietly, you changed this place. Perhaps she had. Perhaps change was measured not in sweeping reform, but in the subtle way. A hangar fell silent when she walked through it. The way men now watched her with consideration instead of dismissal. On her last evening on the island, she took one final walk to the runway. The sea wind smelled of salt and engine oil. The trainer sat under the orange wash of sunset. Patched and ugly and perfect, she touched its wing, the fabric warm beneath her palm. Tiny, she whispered. They'll never use that word the same way again. A plane roared overhead, a fighter returning from patrol, and she looked up. Squinting into the brilliance of the sky she had claimed a piece of. For a moment the sound washed through her, not as memory or threat, but as promise. Then she turned away, ready for whatever came next. The war would end. The world would change. And years later, in classrooms and hangars across the country, young pilots would read her name in manuals and ask, who was she? The answer whispered with respect. No longer mockery would echo back. She was the one they called Tiny, until the day she wasn't.